Guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, July 21st, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about the 2028 presidential election as Democrats eye up moves around the country ahead of expected 2028 national bids. A number of people from Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to my governor, Wes Moore, to former Vice President Kamala Harris, seem to be in the spotlight recently, doing something and doing things that make people believe that they are going to run for president in about 2 years. Now, I never have been the one to shy away from talking about elections too early. In 2017, I started off this channel by talking about the 2020 election. And so looking at where we are today, it actually feels quite fitting that we were talking about the 2028 race right now. It just feels like a fever dream to think about how far we've come. A year ago, Kamala Harris took to the top of the ticket and replaced Joe Biden as the Democratic nominee for president. And it is crazy to think how much has changed in our understanding and perception of electoral politics and the future of the Democratic Party in just one very, very, very long year. Now, CNN put out this article just a few days ago talking about Democrats making 2028 moves. I was actually inspired by it at first, but decided that maybe I'd just shy off away talking about 2028 this early on, especially a lot of speculation. But then we saw this from Politico talking about Governor Andy Beshear of Kentucky actually going down to South Carolina with a potential nod that he might be running in 2028. Many other Democrats, too, have been traveling down to battleground states, also to South Carolina, which is expected to be one of the early primary states in the 2028 race, making inroads already there. Now looking at that as an opportunity for victory or potentially an inroad that might get an endorsement from somebody like Representative Jim Clyburn in the 2028 race. All to say that the 2028 race does seem to be developing, and it very much seems like it is starting right now. Now, we don't know who's that going to be. An opinion piece from The Hill actually was quite funny, saying, will the 2028 Democratic nominee be none of the above? And it's actually a very fair question, right? In 2017, I felt like there was a very clear, at least in my understanding of it, two very clear frontrunners in that primary. It was either going to be Senator Bernie Sanders or former Vice President Joe Biden. And I had always bet that it was going to be Joe Biden. You can find it in any of my videos. I said that I felt like Biden was always going to win that nomination. And I felt like it was a very obvious choice, right? In 2013, you could have easily said it's going to be Hillary Clinton. But this time around, it feels very different. The 2025 race for 2028 isn't actually developing to be a race with a consistent and clear frontrunner. While Kamala Harris does pretty consistently lead in terms of opinion polling in amongst the overall electorate here, we can actually find opinion polling amongst the Democratic base. Kamala Harris's lead has withered since then, not to mention the fact that she hasn't even confirmed that she wants to run for president again. Although Donald Trump did it, only 2 people have ever been able to do that successfully, 3 people actually, in American politics, at least in recent memory. Grover Cleveland, someone you probably learned about while you were in a traditional high school or middle school civics course. Donald Trump became the second president ever to run after losing a term as president and win that race just 4 years later. But Richard Nixon very famously ran for president in 1960, lost that race, ran for it again in 1968 after being governor or running for governor of California. Very similar lineage that or track line here that Democrats are hoping, if they support Kamala Harris, that she might do in the future. But again, all of that is separate conversation. The point that I'm making to you is that there is no clear frontrunner. Without Kamala Harris on the ballot, there's a 0.5% advantage that Pete Buttigieg has. And even with her on the ballot, it's a lead of just 3.7%. So it's nobody out here who's saying, I'm getting 60% of the early primary vote, or even 40% of that early primary vote. Kamala Harris had that a little bit early on, but as she toys with the idea of running for governor of California, it seems less and less likely that she's gearing up, at least right now, to run for president in 2028. But really, it is anybody's ballgame at this point. Taking a look at what is happening, the moves are being made. Everyone is getting out there, whether that's going on podcasts and going to new media, whether that's going to South Carolina or Arizona or other battleground states and making your name known, whether that's establishing and executing on a political action committee or fundraising on behalf of candidates and getting involved in races outside of your state. All of these major names, from Newsom to Shapiro to Whitmer to Pritzker, all of them are making moves that very clearly indicate, I want to run for president. Now, that may not actually be the reality. Some of these candidates may actually not decide to run, and I think a lot of this is fueled by speculation. But we know what the signs look like when somebody wants to run for president of the United States. Even thinking back to the last election that there was a Democratic primary, 2020, or at least one without an incumbent. Joe Biden won the nomination, but he was very clearly gearing up for this very early on. I remember I live in Maryland, and I love watching what happens in politics. I was young. After Donald Trump won the election, I was 13 years old when he won the election for the first time, and I would still be very engaged. And what I remember was that Joe Biden was coming through and swinging through doing a book tour in Washington, D.C. He was doing a bunch of stops across the country, and so were many of these other candidates. They were going to different areas, campaigning for someone like Ben Jealous in my state of Maryland, who very clearly was the Democratic nominee for governor at the time, running against Governor Larry Hogan, and it was clear that these Democrats were getting involved in races because they wanted to run. Joe Biden himself, too, who said in 2017, I'm not going to run, right, was pretty clear on that, but everyone knew that wasn't the case. But he had been endorsing in Democratic primaries. He had been campaigning in the general election. He had been riding that Obama wave, and the approval rating that Joe Biden had nationally. Voters largely liked Joe Biden on the national stage. Same thing with Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. It was clear as day that they were going to run. So now, getting back focused to 2028, what CNN is talking about, well, they're just discussing. What should you watch? What should you look at? Where should you be, keeping your news alerts on? Should it be in California? Should it be in South Carolina? Should it be in Michigan? Very clearly, very good answers here. Gavin Newsom, though, you can see that he has been very oppositional to the GOP as of late on social media, to the press, in response to this new effort by the Republican Party to redraw Texas to gain 5 seats for the GOP. Gavin Newsom is there. He's saying California will do the same thing, even if that threat isn't founded in the easiest constitutional pathway for Newsom to do so. He's saying he'll do it. Kamala Harris is keeping the option open. She has not shied away. People have asked her, are you going to run for president again? The answer, she doesn't know. She said she would decide by the end of the summer, is she running for governor, because she would need to announce that by 2026. But if not, she might be running for president, right? Thinking about Pete Buttigieg. What did he just decide not to do? Well, if you remember our discussion about the Senate race in Michigan, he decided, I'm not going to run for Senate in Michigan. I was mayor of South Bend, Indiana, and it seems like he's gearing up to run for president again. Gretchen Whitmer, likewise, declined to run for Senate in Michigan. Again, pretty easy pathway here to decide to go from governor to run for president. It might be a little bit more tricky if you're a senator and just been elected, and your voters might think, wait, you just got elected and now you're vacating your seat. Interesting to see. J.B. Pritzker, who just announced he's running for a 3rd term. That, I think, is pretty indicative that he wants to remain in the fray. He wants to still be that Democratic governor who's using his bully pulpit in the state to push back against Donald Trump. Right? Rahm Emanuel, who told the press, I have one more race left in me. All of these different things. Andy Beshear, who's going down to South Carolina. The primary focus here, Wes Moore, right? Someone who has said, Wes Moore has said that he's not running for president of the United States, but he very much seems like he would be a strong Democratic contender, and it looks like there could be ambitions on that front. Josh Shapiro, running for re-election in 2026, will probably do very well in a battleground state that Donald Trump won in 2 out of his 3 elections. If he wins it by 10 points or more, pretty easy pathway for him to say, I'm the most electable Democrat. And so it continues. So many people making moves, so many people that we can pinpoint and say, where are you at this point? Because if you weren't trying to maintain your presence as a politician, you wouldn't be as involved in the day and age of politics. And I think there's a difference between caring and engaging, right? I think that the Obamas, Michelle, Barack, both of them do a great job, I think, at staying involved and very relevant in the political atmosphere. But to the degree that it seems like Michelle Obama wants to run in 2028, we don't get that vibe. Even though many people think she would be a very viable candidate and a very strong one, people aren't getting that from what she is putting forth and putting down in terms of her political, engagements. Versus Pete Buttigieg going on to talk shows with conservative-leaning hosts and having 3-hour-long conversations about the future of the nation and trying to appeal to audiences extending beyond the base. That seems more of an indicator that this person, at least, wants a future in politics, whether they want to be president or vice president or run for something else. They're staying engaged for a reason. And as the 2028 race comes around, I think it'd be foolish to not really acknowledge that it was in 2020 that so many candidates decide to run. You had about 20 candidates on the Democratic side in this race, so many across the board, including Kamala Harris, who dropped out before the first primary. So thinking about 2028, I really do expect a lot of candidates to decide to run. I do expect a lot of them to say that looking at the 2028 election, I have what it takes to take on J.D. Vance, or I have what it takes to take on Marco Rubio. And whether or not they are right will be proven by what happens on November 7th, 2028. But it is a presidential race worth watching. And it is on the Democratic side shaping up to be a very early race. I think arguably, too, a lot earlier than the 2020 election. Even when John Delaney, in about 2 months' time, will be in his 8-year reunion, or anniversary, rather, of announcing his bid for president of the United States. So yes, in 2017, it started early on, or maybe it was about November 2017. But either way, we saw that race start off early. We are already seeing start today, and I would argue that it has begun months ago. The way that these governors, representatives, senators, former electeds, whatever it might be, are responding and how they are engaging with Donald Trump is the campaign. And the way that they are traveling, quite frankly, traveling across this nation to state after state, to early primary state, to battleground state, to safe state, to donor state, it is interesting, and it certainly is an indicator that they want to do something to this degree, that they want to remain engaged because they have ambitions that extend beyond the office that they currently hold or did hold. And so I think 2028 will shape up to be an even more competitive primary than 2020 because Biden actually had this one pretty much on lock by the time you reached the end of the cycle. And even when Super Tuesday happened, it was wraps. There was no chance Bernie Sanders was going to win the nomination, even if COVID-19 had never been a thing. And so thinking about 2028, I don't think that it'll wrap on Super Tuesday. I don't think that it'll be said and done for by the time you reach mid-February and early March, because I think this primary in 2028 will be very different since there is no clear frontrunner, and Democrats might be looking for something very different than they were in 2020. And I think they might be looking for some level of Democratic enthusiasm and energy from candidates that they may not have valued as much to the highest degree as they do today. And so watch 2028, keep your eye on how all of these governors and whoever else is maneuvering across the country, because it's not lost on us as to why they are doing it. And this race in 2028 is shaping up to be a fascinating, fascinating race. And for all the right reasons. 2028 is going to be a race for a very interesting one between a Republican primary that's open, a Democratic primary that's open. The last time we had that was 2016, and maybe this time, Democrats will pull ahead and actually win it, because looking at the list of candidates on both sides, Democrats have a very, very, very deeply entrenched bench. The question is, who actually makes it off that bench? Someone has to be the nominee. Someone has to win that primary process. And the only question is right now, as all of them gun for it, who is it going to be? So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2026 House election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.